question about UK-India relationship, where the UK fits in terms of priorities for India, is a great question. And I was in India last in March, and lots of Indian business people or bureaucrats were conveying this real sense that they are now quietly confident about India's place in the world and its rising place in the world. They're less sure about the UK's place in the world, so they are asking the question, what's the UK's relevance to India? How can the UK help us get to where we are going to reach, whether you help us or not? But I think that shows a lack of understanding within that circle, those people I was speaking to, about the strength and depth of the existing relationship and the relevance to the UK, to India. I think 2 years ago this week, I think it was Boris Johnson at the time, yes, and Narendra Modi signed a comprehensive strategic partnership. And India doesn't have one of those with every country in the world. And that covered 5 main themes where the UK and India have got real complementarity and can offer a lot to each other. They cover climate change, healthcare and life sciences, defence and aerospace, and Rahul will be able to come in on that. The people-to-people connects that brings so much vibrancy and dynamism to the UK-India relationship, and of course trade. Now you mentioned the FTA, you implied about delays, ministerial changes. I think it was April last year, Boris Johnson was in India and he said, we'll have a deal by Diwali. On the same day, the government's issued a joint statement that says we will aim to conclude the majority of the talks by Diwali, which they did. So the rhetoric was in one place, the practicalities and the planning were in another. And although there has been some political change in the UK, particularly last autumn, the negotiators were just getting on and doing their jobs. They had a mandate that was signed off by both cabinets to work through the negotiations, and they did that. Early this month, they had the 9th round of those negotiations. The 10th round will take place in Delhi, I think, in the first half of June. And then I think those negotiators are now bumping up against the limits of their mandate. So I suspect over the summer, that's when the politicians are going to be coming in and making some of those trade-off decisions that will be important for getting the deal over the line. So I think the UK is relevant to India. Mm-hmm. Its relevance is underappreciated. I'm going to make, just to name check some people in the room, there's 3 legends of the British High Commission network here today. Andrew Fleming, who was Deputy High Commissioner in Hyderabad. Mark Ronacres, who was Deputy High Commissioner not that long ago, Mark, 20 years ago. I think Creon Butler is here as well, who succeeded Mark as Deputy High Commissioner in India. And the place we are now in the relationship with India is not just about the great diplomats and ministers we've had in recent years, but it's been about the long-term planning and building relationships, not in an aggressive way. Pratik, you and Keith Faz were saying we should be more aggressive. We should be more collaborative with India, not aggressive with India. You don't get anywhere by being aggressive with partners. So that was a long answer, but I think it was an important question and to give a different perspective.
No, thank you. And Neil?
Well, can I first of all say what a tremendous pleasure it was to be out in India, and a huge thanks to FICCI, the Federation of Indian Chambers of Commerce and Industry, for hosting the visit, and the generosity with which ministers gave their time. We had separate sessions with 5 different ministers, and what came over time and time again was the real enthusiasm, the drive for growth, the whole scale, which you can't really just get from facts and figures. The pace, the scale, the enthusiasm, the determination, that invest to grow the economy, and a real want to push forward. So I can fully understand why they will want to look at partners across the world, many different countries to partner with. And I think that gives us the challenge that we have to earn our place. And let's be quite honest about it. The UK has been a little bit absent from the world stage over the last few years, a bit obsessed with Brexit and perhaps not being a strong voice as we might have been. And I think it's high time now we really pushed outwards. But that building of relationships that you've just mentioned is so vital. And certainly in a culture like India, where the courtesy, the time that people take is very, very important, a very important part. And it is, I feel, something we need to, we need to really get back on the front foot. And I think we need to encourage more of our businesses to take part. I mean, if we know some of the things we saw very clearly were, as has been mentioned earlier, a number of German firms that are out there, the way that the French have signed contracts for things. And I do think that sometimes we're not very good at perhaps blowing our own trumpet, perhaps really getting in there. The trade deal I see is only a beginning. I mean, what is very encouraging is hearing Indian ministers talking about opening up the economy, feeling that the economy is now ready. But I think we have to remember it has been a very protectionist economy, and as was mentioned earlier today, some parts of India are still quite restrictive in their practices, and that can pose challenges for our companies. So I think there are a lot of opportunities, huge opportunities, when you see the pace of change, the tech, the progress at all levels. Just looking at some of the investment in the railways, for example, which is something which the UK does have products that they can provide. The scale of it, the ambition to have 90% running on renewables by 2030, the amazing 360 container train, a double-decker carrying 360 containers, high-speed rail, and renewing 1,000 of the 7,000 stations. I mean, this sort of scale that the ministers are talking about is something which I think it's quite staggering for us in this country, where we can't decide whether we're going to do a few miles of HS2 or a bit of Northern Powerhouse or not. And there are opportunities, and I do think that we need to make sure that we perhaps help our businesses more to realise and to look outward a bit more in terms of where they might go.
Thank you so much. And Rahul, with a security lens, in terms of how much is the UK a priority in terms of collaborating on security matters between the UK and India?
So essentially, on the defense and security front, I think the relationship is quite underwhelming. There was a time, 60 years ago, admittedly, when the UK was India's largest defense partner, had the largest share of defense soon after independence and subsequent years. Today, the UK share in India's defense is as low as about 5 to 6%. Now, there are several reasons for this, but essentially, what is important is that India today is really a very different India than it was in the past, and this government particularly is very different. It is, as I've argued before, it is ruthlessly pragmatic. And one of the problems is that there's been a lot of rhetoric in the relationship between India and the UK. And I think large parts of the UK sort of buy into the rhetoric. For the Indian government side, they're very pragmatic. The rhetoric is one thing, but the reality is what matters. And the reality today in defense is that I believe India does see tremendous value in key niche technologies on defense and military that the UK has. But there are problems in terms of how the technology is able to get to India. India's view is that a transfer of technology is important. The UK PLC, Defense PLC's views are, of course, that there are concerns over intellectual property rights for transfer of technology, etc. My point is that if defense is going to be a core aspect of the relationship between the two countries, which it must be, it is already part of one of the 5 pillars of the roadmap 2030 between the two countries, then there needs to be more than just a sort of a leap of faith in terms of defense companies in the UK to actually invest in India. At the same time, India needs to ease some of the restrictive measures it has in terms of UK companies' investment in India. But defense technology transfers, defense industrial collaboration is going to be the name of the game on defense for India in the next decade. In these two areas, there is very little the UK is doing, even in defense industrial collaboration. There are two main projects, an aircraft engine and sort of electric capability for warships. But this is an area that needs prioritization, it needs to be highlighted. And lastly, this is an area that builds trust in the UK-India relationship. And I think that trust element also is not as high as it should be. But, you know, India and the UK have different foreign policy priorities, etc. But to me, defense and security need to be highlighted. So there is an opportunity, but the window is closing.
Thank you so much. Richard, you, I'm assuming, have quite a significant number of the Indian diaspora as part of the membership body. I'd be quite interested to know, just from your perspective, do you feel that there's a growing sense of enthusiasm from your members, of interest in doing business in India? Of course, we've been seeing it sort of, you know, through the media, the starts and the stops, or the perceived starts and stops. What sort of feel do you get from your memberships?
It depends on who you're talking to. And of course, yes, we do have a large number of companies and members who are part of the diaspora, but the diaspora is a very broad term. I mean, it can range from people who have themselves come from India, possibly students, and set up businesses up here, or people who've been here for 5 generations.
Yeah.
And it's a bit like me saying I'm part of the Welsh diaspora in London. I am, but you wouldn't recognise me as a Welshman, or somebody who was born in Hong Kong, the same thing. So I think we've got to be very careful about this word diaspora. I think it's a convenient catch-all term. I think a lot of politicians use it as a way of engineering some sort of connectivity which is not real. I mean, I know some people of the Indian diaspora in London who are business people who are just as nervous about going and doing business in India as people from other diasporas or other ethnic groups, because that's the reality. They're British. My approach is very much looking at it from a London perspective, and I think we spend too much time worrying about the national perspective. I mean, frankly, in the end, trade and commerce is an exercise of trying to get round interference by politicians. And trade and commerce is usually an exercise of trying to get round interference by politicians at the national level who have no comprehension of how trade and policy is done at a regional or state or town or city level. So I'll be going out to India in August as part of our exercise in the London Chamber to form strong connections with other chambers of commerce around the world. I'm not going to go anywhere near Delhi. I'm going to be going to Hyderabad. I'm going to go to Bangalore, and I'm going to go to Chennai. And when I go back to India again next year, I won't be going to Delhi either. I might have to, because the British High Commissioners are friends, so I've got to go and see him. But that's it. I wish London was not the capital of the UK. I see many cities which are like London who benefit from the fact the capital is being put somewhere else. So, for instance, Lagos in Nigeria has benefited from having Abuja, which was basically created as an artificial city in the middle of nowhere to put the politicians, so that suddenly Lagos is able to flourish as a commercial global centre. Just thinking about where we might put, forgive me, near the politicians from Westminster. I'd be quite happy for Westminster as political centre to go somewhere else in the country. It would be a huge benefit to all of us not to have to worry about London as a global city being seen purely through the eyes as a subset of national politics. That's not what great cities are, which is why particularly I'm interested in going to Bangalore and going to Hyderabad and going to Chennai. Because I think the advantage you have because of the scale of India, not just the numeracy scale, but distances, is you have that distance from Delhi, and there is a psychological benefit of engaging with you, because I think there's actually a much more granular relationship between politicians at a subnational level and commerce than there is at a national level. I'd just like to say something also about students. I was a Commonwealth Scholarships Commissioner for 8 years, awarding around 800 scholarships a year for people all around the Commonwealth to come to the UK to do research, mostly research, about thirds PhD, 2/3 masters. I'm a Commonwealth scholar myself. I was the reverse. I went to Sri Lanka. I got a place at the Indian Institute of Fundamental Science in Bangalore, but the competition was Bangalore Theoretical Ecology, Blackboard, Sri Lanka studying elephants. Sorry, Sri Lanka won. But what I have noticed in doing that is that there isn't enough flow back in the other direction. I'm a rare thing. I'm a Brit who went on a Commonwealth scholarship to another country to study there. And I've benefited hugely from that. The other thing we tried to do when I was a Commonwealth Scholarship Commissioner, which was a bit of a struggle, was to start to do split-site degrees. And we particularly flourished in doing those with India, where we found students who were doing a PhD at an Indian university, registered for that, who would then come to a partner university in London, or UK, sorry, to do a piece of research or a piece of actual experimentation work or talking to people as part of their degree. So it's split site. They got the benefit of coming to a UK university, but they were still based and still getting their degree from their home university in India. And that was great. We got better talent, actually, applying for those. And I think it created a much more secure and lasting relationship than simply bringing people out of the Indian system to do postgraduate work in the UK. So I think a lot of this is about trying to not look at this through a national lens, not trying to look at it through the lenses of politicians, but start looking at it through a subnational lens, start thinking about what businesses want to do. I mean, in the end, India and Britain are two liberal democracies with an argumentative public who basically every few years decide, frankly, that people in charge, we've had enough of them, surely an alternative is better. And that's great. What we've got to do is start to actually get the message across from commercial communities in both countries. That actually, we know what we're doing. We just need you to stand aside a bit.
So Richard, in your opinion, this sort of waiting around for the FTA to materialise, actually, you can just go business as usual, and actually you have seen progress. I mean, the UK lawyers now have access to the Indian market. How much of, what sort of change will the FTA bring? And actually, the business community should just start looking for.
Well, in the end, it's never an FTA. There's no such thing as a free trade agreement. It's a complete misnomer. It's basically the removal of some barriers. And also, so much trade negotiation done at a government level is about negotiating a transaction. Trade never flourishes if we treat trade as a transactional activity. The object of trade is to make the cake bigger for everyone. It's not just to grab a larger slice of the cake for yourself. And I'm afraid political negotiators see it like that. Diplomatic negotiators see trade agreements as how do we use this agreement to make the cake as a whole bigger? How do we celebrate the fact that our partner is getting great things out of this rather than just us? And I think we've got to get back to that non-mercantilist, non-transactional approach to trade. How can we remove barriers all the time? And I think businesses have got to take the lead in saying, these are the barriers you want. But in the end, we are able to do a lot of trade between India and Britain. It's a question of will, it's a question of people meeting each other, and it's a question of shared enthusiasm. And that's what it should be about, and that's where trade is going to come from. No amount of government agreement is going to create a single business deal. It's business people meeting each other, finding clients, finding customers, finding supply chains, which is going to do business, nothing else.
Great, thank you. Jayesh, would love to know about, obviously everyone's very focused on tech. Tech is a very broad term. Would love to know how, obviously you're traveling, you're looking to build relationships to leverage and bringing investment into your state to benefit the people of Telangana. How do you see the UK in terms of priority? Is it because obviously the Indian diaspora has done extremely well in the tech scene in the US. So for you, is the UK in your sort of top 5 priorities? And are there any particular specific areas within Telangana, within the tech sector that is of interest that you feel would build and grow the relations between the UK and India?
Thank you. Thank you, Farzana. But before I answer that, I'd like to pick a point which Richard mentioned about the importance of sub-regional regional governments. So what he said about the UK is also very true about India. India is a federal country. There are 28 provinces. And while there is a national government which decides on national priorities, national programs, but states also enjoy lots of autonomy. They can choose their own priorities, they can have their own programs. And whenever we go out to talk to investors like we are doing now in the UK, one of the key messages that we share is that it is not one India. There are 28 Indias, to be frank. And you should find out which India is more aligned with your own priorities, with your own ways of doing business. And you will find that these 28 Indias also are moving at different trajectories. Some of them, like our province of Telangana, is far more progressive. You mentioned that we rank very high on ease of doing business. And there are many other parameters also on which we have become some kind of a national role model today. So this is exactly what Richard also mentioned, that look at partnerships at the regional levels, at the states level. And we have been very successful in doing some of this. So it's a nice coincidence that we are speaking about it. As soon as this session gets over, I'm actually sitting with people from West Midlands. There's a big delegation from West Midlands which has come from all the way from Birmingham. We are spending a couple of hours. We met them last year as well, and this is a kind of a follow-up meeting to understand what progress we have made and what new can we also explore. To mention about technology, so technology also is a very important opportunity in these bilateral relations. In fact, I again feel very proud to share with you that one of the first global companies which came to India and incidentally came to Hyderabad was the HSBC. HSBC today has grown so much, it has close to 30,000 headcount in Hyderabad. There has been more number of American companies. Of course, American companies have discovered Hyderabad much more than the British. As my colleague was pointing out, all the top tech biggies have their largest footprints outside their US headquarters in Hyderabad. But there is no reason why that same opportunity can't be explored or exploited by other British companies. In fact, as all of us see it happening all around us, the pace of digitalization has enormously increased, and companies today are realizing that if they don't digitalize, they're going to perish. And many of these companies recognize that instead of setting up tech centers or digital centers in their own countries, India gives a good value proposition for them. And within India, of course, Hyderabad and a couple of other cities like Bangalore, like Pune, like Chennai, they are pretty strong as technology hubs. So again, I'm very happy to share that while HSBC was one of the trend setters, things had slowed down, but things are picking up again. In fact, Deliveroo has chosen to set up its tech center, development center in India, and have chosen to do it in Hyderabad. Coincidentally, Andrew, who was the Deputy High Commissioner at that time, and I together had inaugurated that facility. And that facility is also doing pretty well now. And again, it's a matter of great happiness. Tomorrow, we are signing with two other UK companies, two other big UK organizations who have also decided to set up their tech centers in Hyderabad. So that announcement will happen today. I guess it's not fair to disclose who they are. I don't want to steal their thunder, but two big companies who have chosen to set very large tech centers in Hyderabad. And today India gives lots of opportunities in dabbling with new generation technologies. In fact, there is huge talent available in artificial intelligence, in machine learning, in blockchain, in cybersecurity, apart from the basic, writing code, programs, and so on and so forth. So the big opportunity is, apart from trade, manufacturing, is also in tech area. And we are open for business. We welcome companies, and these are not tech companies per se. So Deliveroo, no one would call it a pure play tech company, but they felt that the product development, the software development that they need to do to keep themselves competitive can be better done in Hyderabad rather than possibly in London, and so on. So these are very good examples to emulate, and we are very hopeful that more and more British interest in exploring the tech vertical in India will start to happen now.
And Jayesh, you've been very successful, you and your team, in promoting Telangana around the world, bringing in investment from leading global companies. And it's been mentioned earlier by your fellow panelists that it is so important that it's not just focused upon noisy capitals, Delhi and London, and the regions are engaged and they collaborate. And what I wanted to find out from you is any wisdom can you share to other people who are not in the main capitals in India and in the UK, and they want to build relationships and they want to attract trade and develop. What would you advise, because you've done such a great job in attracting these companies?
Thank you. So let me share some data points with you. So in the last 9 years, so some of you may not know this, but Telangana is a new state in India. The Constitution of India allows new states to be created, and in 2014, June 2014, the state of Telangana was created. Now, if you look at the performance in these last 9 years, we have received approximately 35 billion pounds of investment, both from domestic investors as well as global investors.
Fantastic.
But one very interesting data point, typically other Indian states either don't capture that data or don't report that data, but we feel very proud in both capturing and reporting that data, which is about the number of repeat investments. Suppose a company has chosen to invest in your state once. Have they decided to continue that relationship? Have they invested more? Have they done new lines of activity in your state? So again, as I said, other states don't measure it, but if they were to do so, I would still think that they would fall much, much short of what our performance is. So 24% of our investments of these 35 billion pounds that we have received are repeat investments, which means that the investors find the going to be really, really good for them. They have the choice of going anywhere else in the country as well. So there are 5 things that we offer as a template. I mean, if a British investor or an overseas investor wants to do something in Hyderabad, there are 5 things that we offer. So one is talent. I mean, so for instance, Deliveroo, when they chose to come to Hyderabad, as I said, I was present during the inauguration. I was told that they evaluated 6 other Indian cities, but they felt that the best opportunity is in Hyderabad because we give you very good talent, which also is much more affordable. So for technology in particular, at the end of the day, it becomes a competition between Hyderabad and Bangalore. These are the largest 2 tech centers in the country. And people typically find this, that the quality of talent is pretty good in both the cities, but the Hyderabad talent comes at a much more affordable rate, and the levels of attrition are much lower. And the government also has a program. If you're looking at some skill sets which are typically not available, our colleges don't teach that, and that skill set is absent, then the government spending its own money creates those talent sets. So talent is something which is very important. The value proposition on infrastructure again is very important. What kind of IT parks are there? What kind of real estate? What kind of connectivity? What kind of social infrastructure? So that is again something which is very important. Innovation is again a very important feature of the tech landscape that we offer. You yourself mentioned that we have created some phenomenal global standard innovation institutions. T-Hub is one example. And most of the new generation companies today are keen to become more and more innovative, keen to partner with startups, keen to identify entrepreneurs who are able to provide solutions and products for them. So Hyderabad scores much more over other Indian cities, comparable cities, on that element of innovation. And of course, is the government proactive, progressive, supportive of or not? So I'll give you an example. In India, lockdown, the COVID-induced lockdown first started in March 2020. And it was a pretty harsh lockdown. In fact, the Indian Prime Minister came on television and suddenly announced that in the next few hours, we are stopping everything. So didn't give enough heads up to people to prepare for it. Now, in 2020, at that time, Hyderabad had close to 650,000 IT sector employees. And the Indian IT industry has its own association, which is called NASSCOM. And if you ask NASSCOM, where in India did the smoothest transition from office to home happened, they'll invariably speak about Hyderabad. In flat 5 days, we were able to shift each of those 650,000 people to their homes with their systems, with all approvals, permissions, getting bandwidth enhanced in their residential neighborhoods. So government also is very progressive, proactive. The industry recognizes it. And therefore, they feel that this is the template, the ease of doing business, talent, value proposition on infrastructure, innovation. And we have kind of mastered it. And today it rolls out very, very smoothly for our investors.
Yeah, well, it's fascinating. Thank you so much for sharing, and also I think it's really helpful for the audience to understand just how much it takes for a state like Telangana to have all of its pieces in place to create the right ecosystem, because it's really linking the educational institutions to ensure that the knowledge workers are there, that the pipeline of talent are there, the infrastructure, the government support, and so forth. And then just last question, Jayesh, in terms of companies that are interested in Telangana or other states, how do they find information about what are the incentives? Are there tax incentives for R&D units, for instance? So where would they find that information? Just
Yes.
Yeah.
So our website is pretty informative.
Yeah.
www.invest.telangana.gov.in, and it explains everything. So I kind of didn't speak much about incentives, but since you mentioned it, let me add a couple of points on that. So the reality is that all the 28 provinces in India offer incentives, and I won't claim, I mean that will be an exaggeration if I make that claim, that we give the best incentives. That is not true. There could be other states who are giving power at a cheaper rate, someone gives more capital subsidies, someone gives better tax breaks. But all I can tell about Telangana is that if you look at the totality of the picture, we'll be amongst the best. But there is something else very interesting about Telangana. There's a flexibility in our investment policy, which is that if you are an investor on whom we are very keen, and if you tell me that another state has given me this incentive, we have a meet or beat policy. So if you tell me that this state has given this to me, I'll close my eyes and say yes to it. There's no back and forth, there's no negotiation. Instantly we can take that decision and bring you inside. And I can share this with you.
Yeah.
We were here in the UK last year as well, approximately at the same time. And as I said, we have a partnership with the West Midlands folks. We went to Coventry, where we found that there is a new age electric vehicle manufacturer called Arrival, which was looking at India. And they were looking at a couple of other states as well. So we were able to use this meet or beat kind of an offer. And now they have decided to set up their micro factory in our state.
That's fantastic. That's absolutely fantastic. Do we have something similar in the UK that we can vie with region to region? And
I don't think we do. I don't think it's enough, because I really think Parliament hasn't devolved enough authority out to English regions. It's devolved a certain amount of authority out to Wales, Scotland, Northern Ireland, but not to the English regions.
Yeah.
And certainly in London, we sort of feel anything to do with trade is governed by Westminster. And London's not flavour of the month at the moment with Westminster. So we have the budget for DIT in London was cut by 85% last year. There are no trade advisors in London. So, what I'm hoping, and I'll declare an interest here, I'm a member of the Labour Party, but I'm the sort of member Mia hates because I don't do anything useful, is I just hope when the Labour Party comes in as the next government, which I hope it will, there will be a massive trend in devolution, which is going to be about liberating businesses around Britain to actually relate directly to their local government, and the way that people in Hyderabad can relate to you and do things which are actually in the local interest.
Yeah, indeed, very much on the cards. But I would agree with you. We're very over-centralised in the UK. Yeah.
Fantastic. So, last question, for the panel. It's obviously post-COVID, a lot of people went into remote working. You mentioned in your state how easy it was, relatively speaking, for people to go. In India, there's a tremendous amount of knowledge workers, and you have a lot of the big professional service firms are based, have a significant workforce in India. Obviously, that's opened up a lot more opportunities that people don't always just have to go to India or the UK and open up a physical bricks and mortar and have, sort of people sitting at chairs. There's new ways of doing business that actually lower the costs of entry. We also live in a world where there's geopolitical tensions with China, and that has an impact on supply chains. And so we're beginning to see a lot of companies in the West in particular that are sort of reviewing their supply chains in China and are beginning to look more and more to India. So there is a huge appetite for, for collaboration with India, not just with the UK, but with other countries in the West as well. So my question to the panel is, post-COVID, with also new ways of working, with remote working, small businesses and medium businesses in the UK can now set up shop in India a lot easier because before it would be very expensive for them to open up offices and so forth. But now with remote working, a lot of the the entry prices have reduced. My question to the panel is: are you optimistic that actually post-COVID, with the geopolitical issues with China and the focus more moving in terms of supply chain with India, are you more positive in terms of the trade relationship between India and the UK to grow much more sort of quicker and faster than it has been in the past? So number one, I want to ask, just to get temperature of how optimistic you are. And then the second is, what do you think both countries can do in order, and that be it political or private sector, but what are the drivers that would increase the growth from your unique perspectives that you all have from your own jobs and careers? So yeah, over to you first.
Okay, shall I start?
Yes, please.
Well, I am optimistic. I'm optimistic because of what I've seen in recent years. And if you look at just the last 12 months, or the last 4 quarters, UK trade with India has grown by 45% in the last 12 months, from 24 billion to 36 billion.
But was that because there was a dip during COVID, or actually that's upward?
A rise. So that's the last 4 quarters. So things did slow down and dip during COVID, but this is higher than it's ever been. I think Richard was right in a number of aspects about the FTA. One, it should be a win-win. It shouldn't be about what we can get out of India. It's about what can happen in the relationship. I think the FTA will be a bit like Rahul indicated on the defence sector. It's important for the relationship. The FTA is partly to strengthen a political relationship, but it will open up new opportunities for businesses. If tariffs are reduced, if standards are aligned, it will make entering each other's markets less expensive and less bureaucratic. I'm also optimistic because of people like Jayesh and his minister, Ram, and other state ministers are following their lead and starting to be more business friendly. I disagree with Richard about politicians, partly. Politicians and top bureaucrats like Jayesh are really important in India because it is complex and more highly regulated than here in the UK. So brilliant bureaucrats and politicians can help in India are important. In the UK, politicians can hinder. And they can hinder by, as Nia said, the last 5, 6, 7 years. From an Indian perspective, we've been fighting amongst ourselves rather than setting out a national vision. Politicians can also hinder by through policies. I read this morning that the government is preparing plans to limit the number of, to prevent one-year masters international students from bringing dependents with them. That will impact a relatively small percentage of the Indian students who come to the UK. But the signal that sends to India is a hugely negative one. It will say that Indians are not allowed to bring dependents. The message will get out that Indians are not welcome in the UK. That will impact universities and stop students who are coming on their own to do undergrad from applying for UK universities. So those sorts of messages that come out get onto the front page of Indian newspapers, are on Indian television shows. So our politicians, if when you come to power, be aware that those signals get picked up and have a big impact.
That's very good. Thank you so much. Nia, do you share Kevin's optimism?
Well, I'm going to have to be a little bit political here, aren't I? Basically, if we get into government, growth is going to be the defining mission of the next Labour government, because that is what we all need. We desperately need growth in the economy. And the great thing about India, obviously, it's a fabulous example. There's sort of this determination, this sort of 6 to 8% growth through investment. The fact that the number of startups starting out in India every month is the highest of any country in the world. I mean, these are fantastic examples for us to want to learn from and to want to be part of. And trade is an absolutely essential part of growth. As Richard has said, I mean, trade is about growing that cake. It's about getting growth into our economy. And I think we also recognise that there has to be investment. There has to be an understanding that we want to push forward. We want to push forward with the new technologies. Obviously the race to net zero. I mean, look at the absurdity of the fact that India has partnership with the EU through the Horizon programme. We were in the Horizon programme, and of course, completely dropped the ball and dropped out of it with the whole Brexit negotiation, in inverted commas. You've got that associate partnership. We should be in the same sorts of associate partnership. We should be partnering more directly with India's universities. That sort of push forward on the research, the development, the innovation. If you're not getting ahead of the game, then you get behind, you lose out. So it's not about trying to stay still. The growth that you want to create has to be created through positive drive forward and positive determination to foster it and to make sure that we get that. And one of the things again that we're looking at very much is a industrial strategy which has a separate body, a council, an independent council that can see it go through no matter the changes in government. And again, to have that there, to have that interacting with our trading relationships as well would be very positive, I think.
Brilliant. Thank you so much. Rahul, you mentioned earlier that the sort of UK contribution to the defence and security market is somewhat underwhelming. Are you optimistic that could grow? What are the drivers, if any, that could help the UK security and defence companies position themselves for greater opportunities in that sector?
So I'm cautiously optimistic, and the reason for this are fourfold. Firstly, when I ended my last statement and mentioned that the window was closing, and what I meant by that was that India is now going to go into an election mode. Yeah. We'll have Indian elections in just over a year from now. The political focus is going to shift for the government, and admittedly the central government, but all state governments as well, onto an election mode, whereby I think there is likely to be some disruption or some shift, especially on the defense sector. Yeah. The second reason I'm cautiously optimistic and not overly optimistic is that within the next year at least, it will be most important to see the visit of the Indian cabinet level defense minister to the UK. Yeah. There's been no such visit for 20 years.
20 years?
For the Indian cabinet level defense minister to the UK for 20 years. He was supposed to, Rajnath Singh was supposed to have come in last year, but for various reasons that did not happen. But we hope, and I think for defense, the relationship, it is imperative that he does come to the UK. But again, I'm hopefully maybe in June or July. The third reason I think why I'm cautiously optimistic is that, again, I mentioned the rhetoric and the reality. And the reality is that on the Indian side, there are irritants in the bilateral relationship. These irritants are several, but I think most recently we've seen a concern over extremist elements in the UK from the diaspora community. And the government in Delhi takes this very seriously, as the British government has taken it. And Alex Ellis was on television the other day talking about no tolerance for extremism in the UK. But these are irritants that are part and parcel of the relationship, but they need to be addressed. And unless they are addressed, we'll never have that level of trust I was talking about. And my last point, the reason again why I'm only cautiously optimistic is that for long I've argued that the Indian government needs to have a relationship with the UK that the Indian government has with the US. That is, it doesn't matter which party is in power, the Democrat or the Republicans, India has sort of bipartisan support. It's not the case in the UK. And I've argued with the Indian government that it's very important to build relationships with the Labour Party. And there are deep concerns that the Indian government has over the Labour Party to ensure that some of the the problems are overcome. I think these relationships are being built, but they need to be deepened much, much more. And I don't see that happening. And unless that happens, if and when Labour Party takes over the government in the UK, I think India will have some challenges in terms of some of the backbencher Labour Party MPs. So those are the 4 reasons why I'm sort of cautiously optimistic, but not overly optimistic.
Well, thank you so much for your pragmatism. Very incredible insight. And then over to Richard. We welcome your contrarian views, so please do share.
They're not that contrarian. Well, I run a business, so of course I am irrationally optimistic about everything. You can't, if you're not basically an optimist, you can't run a business. And I see everything through sort of a commercial set of rose-tinted spectacles. So, yeah, I'm really optimistic. I think with India, I'm very optimistic, particularly because I think there is an underlying environment of personal trust. And even though there are disagreements at a political level at times, and they are irritating, and they are felt to be more irritating because they seem to run counter to a basic underpinning of trust between peoples in our 2 countries. And I think that is invaluable in our rather fractious world if that underpinning of trust is there, and it's essential for business. You can't do business successfully with people you don't actually feel a sense of trust and affiliation to.
There's really building that relational capital. Yeah. Thank you. And Jayesh?
So I would also agree that a balanced and equitable FTA will definitely be good for both the countries. In fact, in the last couple of years, India has signed 2 very significant FTAs. One is with Australia and one is with UAE. And the initial results are very, very positive. So no reason to disbelieve that a good FTA between India and UK will not help either of the sides. But one additional point, see, we have not spoken much of it in this panel, but I know that that also can be very important for strengthening relations between India and UK, which is the knowledge exchange between universities, institutions of higher learning. I myself have studied here, and I know the high quality of talent and quality of work output which comes out of it. And benefiting from the autonomy that we enjoy as a state, we have embarked upon multiple partnerships with British universities. And I again feel very proud to share with you that there are 4 active partnerships. The Cranfield University is helping us run programs on aerospace and defense. We have an MOU with King's College London. They are helping us set up a world-class life sciences university. We partner with University of Birmingham. There's a Center of Excellence on Cold Chain in Hyderabad, established by Birmingham University. And we partner with the Manchester Metropolitan University, ManMet. They have set up a Center of Excellence on additive manufacturing. And another 3-4 partnerships are under discussion. So again, as a state, we value the opportunities these partnerships bring. We can get access to some of the best tech innovations, knowledge innovations which is happening in Britain, and give benefit of that to achieve our own economic agenda. So again, that is one area. I hope the FTA kind of also covers it in some way or the other, so that more and more of this kind of knowledge partnership and knowledge exchange happens to benefit both the sides.
Yeah, thank you. I agree that knowledge bridges facilitate trade and trust.